You walk into work on Monday morning. You've just finished what might be the best project of your career. You stayed late, you did the extra research, you triple-checked everything. And then your colleague walks into your boss's office. They share a laugh. And somehow by Friday, your colleague gets the promotion. You never even got a conversation. And the worst part? You already knew it was going to happen. You could feel it coming for months. That sick feeling in your stomach when your boss lights up around certain people and goes completely flat around others. Welcome to the favoritism game. And here's the thing nobody wants to say out loud. This game is not fair, it was never designed to be fair. And most advice about it is completely wrong. Today we're going to break down exactly how workplace favoritism works, why smart, hardworking people keep losing to it, and what you can actually do when you're stuck in an organization where the rules are invisible and the game is already rigged. Stick with me because some of what I'm about to tell you is going to be uncomfortable, but it will absolutely change how you see your career. Let's start with the uncomfortable truth. Most people believe favoritism at work is about the boss being corrupt or petty or just plain unfair. And sometimes it is. But most of the time, favoritism is something far more structural and far more insidious than one bad manager playing favorites. It is a system that looks completely rational from the inside, while producing completely irrational outcomes for the people living through it. Here is what is actually happening. Your manager is not keeping a detailed spreadsheet of every contribution you have made. They are not running calculations in a spreadsheet to decide who gets recognized and who gets passed over. What they are actually doing is maintaining a feeling, a gut-level impression of who is valuable, who is reliable, who belongs in important rooms, and who doesn't. And that feeling gets built through repeated small interactions, not through the actual quality of your work. Think about that for a second. You could be the best performer on your team, technically speaking, and still lose every single time because someone else has built a better story in your manager's head. Not a better record, a better story. That is where favoritism gets its real power. It hides behind what feels like a reasonable human judgment call. Now here is where it gets worse. The people who benefit most from favoritism are often not consciously gaming the system. Most of them genuinely believe they earned everything they got. They are not lying. From their perspective, they built relationships. They communicated their work. They were present in the right moments. They did do those things. But the playing field underneath all of that was never level to begin with. There is a concept that explains a lot of this. It is called the visibility gap. Two people do identical work. One sends regular updates to their manager. Nothing elaborate, just consistent communication about what they are doing and why it matters. The other person puts their head down, delivers excellent results, and assumes that excellence will be noticed on its own. 6 months later, the manager has a clear, vivid picture of person 1 and a vague blur where person 2 should be. In any high-stakes moment, budget cuts, promotions, project assignments, that blur loses every single time. This is not corruption. This is just how human memory and perception work. Invisible work gets treated as if it never happened. But here is the layer that most career advice completely misses. Even if you solve the visibility problem, even if you communicate perfectly and make your work impossible to ignore, you can still lose the favoritism game because there is something else operating underneath the surface, something most people only figure out after they have already been burned multiple times. Let us call it the insider economy. Every workplace has one. It is the informal network of trust and loyalty that decides who gets access to real information, who gets tapped for the projects that actually matter, who gets a quiet heads up before something bad happens, and who gets left out in the cold when the politics shift. The insider economy is not posted anywhere. It is not in your employee handbook. It does not show up in any org chart, but it is more powerful than any of those things. And the people who run it are usually not the loudest people in the room. Here is how you end up on the outside of it without even knowing. You arrive, you do great work, You keep your professional distance because you were taught that professionalism means separating work from personal connection. What you don't realize is that by keeping that distance, you are opting out of every informal conversation, every hallway decision, every moment where trust actually gets built. Your colleagues and your manager are forming bonds in those spaces, and over time, those bonds translate into access, opportunity, and yes, favoritism. This creates one of the most maddening experiences in professional life. You watch someone get ahead who, by every objective measure, should not be ahead of you. They are not better at the job. Their outputs are not stronger, but they are better at something you were never told to work on. They are better at being known, and by the time you figure that out, they are already 2 rungs above you. So now you understand what favoritism actually is and where it comes from. But here is the part of this conversation most people rush past, because they are too angry to get to it. What do you do when you are inside a system where favoritism is actively working against you? Not theoretically, not in some future job, but right now, today, in the organization you are currently in? First, let's get honest about something. There are different kinds of favoritism, and the strategy for dealing with each one is completely different. The first kind is structural favoritism. This is baked into the organization. Certain people have access to powerful sponsors. Certain teams get the budgets and the visibility. Certain roles are positioned for advancement, and others are career plateaus that nobody will admit are career plateaus. If you are sitting in one of those invisible roles, no amount of excellent work will move you because the ceiling is structural, not personal. The second kind is managerial favoritism. Your boss has people they like and people they merely tolerate, and you have somehow ended up in the second group. This is personal, this is painful, and this is also the kind that most people can do something about if they move strategically. The third kind is the most dangerous, and it is the one people recognize last. Let's call it performance theater favoritism. This is where the whole system appears meritocratic. There are performance reviews, there are ratings, there are feedback conversations, but the outcomes are decided before any of that happens, and the process exists to justify the conclusion rather than determine it. If you are in a performance theater system, the game is rigged in a way that is specifically designed to make you think it is not rigged. Knowing which one you are dealing with changes everything, because if it is structural, the answer is usually to find a different structure. If it is managerial, there are real moves you can make. If it is performance theater, you need to document everything and start building your exit plan while protecting yourself in the present. Now let us talk about the moves. And I want to be careful here because a lot of advice on this topic is either hopelessly naive or it crosses into manipulation. What I am going to give you is something in between. Honest, strategic thinking about how to operate inside a system that is not fair without compromising who you are. Move 1. Make your work visible without making it annoying. There is a difference between documenting your contributions and constantly talking about yourself. The goal is to make sure the right people have an accurate picture of what you are doing and why it matters. Short, consistent updates beat infrequent, elaborate presentations. Build the habit of making your work legible to the people who make decisions. Not performatively, not for applause, just clearly and consistently. Move 2. Build relationships outside your immediate chain. The favoritism game is most powerful when one person controls the entire narrative of your career. If the only person who can vouch for your work is your boss, and your boss has decided you are not a favorite, you are completely trapped. But if you have built real working relationships with people across the organization, people who have seen your work and respect it, then no single manager can define your ceiling. This is not about politics for its own sake. It is about distributing the evidence of your competence, so it cannot all be controlled by one person. Move 3. Understand when a situation is genuinely unsalvageable. This is the one people resist the most, because accepting it means accepting that sometimes you cannot win no matter how well you play. But staying in an unwinnable game too long is one of the most expensive career mistakes you can make. Not just in terms of promotions missed, but in terms of confidence lost, energy spent, and time that you will never get back. The honest test is this: if you removed your boss from the equation entirely, would the organization still have a place for someone with your skills and your track record? If the answer is yes, the problem is manageable and fixable. If the answer is no, then the issue runs deeper than any strategy can solve. Move 4. Document everything that matters. This is not about building a legal case, though sometimes that becomes necessary. It is about protecting your sense of reality in an environment that may be actively trying to distort it. When you have receipts, when you can look back and see clearly what happened versus what you were told happened, you stay anchored. You do not start doubting yourself. You do not accept the narrative that the problem is your performance, when the evidence shows clearly that the problem is something else entirely. Here is the emotional reality of all of this that nobody talks about enough. Living inside a system where favoritism is working against you is genuinely exhausting in a way that is hard to explain to people who haven't experienced it. It is not just the career impact. It is the daily psychological cost of doing your best work while watching it consistently undervalued. It erodes confidence in ways that follow you home. It makes you cynical in ways you never wanted to be. And if you stay in it long enough without a strategy, it changes how you see yourself. Which is exactly why the most important move in the whole favoritism game is the one that happens before any of the tactical stuff. You have to decide that your value is not up for debate. You have to hold that as a fixed point while you navigate the politics. Because the moment you accept the favoritism narrative, the moment you start to believe that you were passed over because you were not good enough, you have already lost something much more important than a promotion. The favoritism game is real. The rules are invisible by design. The playing field is not level, and it was never supposed to be. But here is what is also true. Understanding the game clearly, seeing the actual mechanics underneath the surface, knowing the difference between a situation you can change and one you cannot, that knowledge is itself a form of power. Not the power to make the system suddenly fair, but the power to stop letting an unfair system define your story. You are not losing because you are not good enough. You are losing because you are playing one game while the score is being kept in a completely different one. And now that you know that, you get to decide your next move with your eyes fully open.